Okay. Good morning, Pixelogic fans. Alright, my name is Aiman Akhtar, and I'm doing today's live stream for you guys, 3D printing in ZBrush, ideas to reality. Let me do a quick check first before we begin to make sure that things are running properly on Twitch and the Facebook Live channels. So you might hear double audio for a second as I double check this. Alright, sweet. So Facebook's working. Let's check in on Twitch. Sweet. Hear myself on Twitch. Okay. Hi, Joanne. Got the conversations running on Twitch well, and let's double check on Facebook as well. Hi, all. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to type it in the chat windows on Facebook or the Twitch channel, and I will be monitoring them time to time, and I'll get to answering your questions as soon as possible. Alright, we can play some music a bit later and get jamming on some ZBrush sculpting. But I guess for those of you that are tuning in fresh, let me do a quick recap. Let's see, open up some stuff for you guys. Alright, my name is Aiman. I'm a 3D artist in Los Angeles, California. I've been doing a lot of 3D print stuff in the past 4 years. That really ranges, quite a bit. I've got my own company, 3D Smiths, where I help people bring their 2D creations to life as 3D maquettes, usually for pitching animation shows. And then I've worked at Aaron Sims Creative for a little while on character concept 3D printing. That's usually for pitch work as well. 3 Black Dot for making collectible toys. Stupid Buddy Studios for using 3D printing to make stop motion animation characters that would actually be animated. The 3D prints were painted and animated. And I've also done large-scale sculpture using 3D printing. This was a fun job in particular with the Lion Studios working on the Blizzard Overwatch Colossal Collectibles. And most recently, I'm in the process of launching my own toy line, Fungusaurs. Little dinosaur mushroom hybrids, my own little blind box series that my wife and I are creating and art directing and funding. And we had a successful Kickstarter in November, and so now the goal is to get this project to the backers by this year, September, November. And I've got these toys in mass production right now. So that's a quick recap on me. You can check out my stuff on aiman3d.com or find me on Instagram, aimanaktar3d. Right now, I also teach an online class at Mold3D Academy. That's mold3dacademy.com. You can just go to self-paced classes, and because right now it's only a self-paced option. In the end of summer, I'll be doing an instructed full 8-week course. And you can click on 3D printing for ZBrush artists, and I cover all sorts of stuff. I cover 3D printing for wearables, 3D printing for collectibles, jewelry, and it's 8 weeks of lectures, all sorts of stuff, and you can check out a bunch of my student work here. That's mold3dacademy.com. Alright, so that's it for the intro. Let's get started on what I was doing last week. So, let's see here. The easiest way to follow along if you are interested in this kind of thing is you can go to pixelogic.com/ZBrushLive, author Aiman Akhtar. Or you can just go to, let's see here, I believe I've got it bookmarked. Pixelogic.com ZBrush Live presenters. And you can see all the awesome artists that Pixelogic has streaming for them. Shane Olson, one of my favorite instructors, Joseph Druss, Madman, Genius. All of these people, you can basically scroll down and find whoever streams you want to watch. Mine are right there. And that'll take you to this page. And you can see I'm streaming on Mondays, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I'm talking about 3D printing, bringing ideas from my head through ZBrush into reality. And you can see some of my past streams. So I've been talking about making some of my own Fungusaurs for the first few streams, so you can watch how I go about designing a collectible toy for mass production, at least vinyl scale, small, like 3 inches or so. So you can learn about that process, and I'm going to get back to that. But last week I started talking about doing a 3D printed suit of armor for any cosplay purposes or prop making. And I've got a giant printer here, the Raise 3D N2 Plus, which is an FDM printer. So in addition to my Formlabs stereolithography printer, in which I do small scale printing, I've got this beast now to do large scale printing. So I wanted to take on a complex large scale project. So you can watch last week's over here on pixelogic.com, ZBrush Live, author Aiman Akhtar. And you know what? Just to make it easier for you guys, I'm just going to paste that into the Facebook chat and the Twitter chat. No, not Twitter chat. Is Twitter chat a thing? I'm sure it is. But the Twitch chat. Alright, so that link is in there for you. So you can see what's going on this little cover image already. I've got this gorget, which is just this giant piece for the neck and the chest, and then a scale suit. And to give you a little bit of background, what I'm making is not Jurassic Park. I love Jurassic Park. Can't wait for the movie to come out. But let's turn some of these pieces on. I've simplified my concept a bit from last week, for any of you that were watching the stream, because I was doing a lot of scales all over the body, and I realized the shoot is this weekend. So if it does happen this weekend, we might push it around. But if it does happen this weekend, we're doing like an actual underwater shoot, where my friend Jess is going to actually help me learn how to do photography underwater. And we've got a photographer, Brett Stanley. Let's see. Let me show you guys what that is. So I'm making an Aquaman suit, basically. And the idea is to have Aquaman mixed with a little bit of doing a universe crossover with the whole Infinity War series, Marvel DC combined. And I'm going to make a Infinity chest plate with all the gems in it, and then scaled suit. And so we'll see how scaled it ends up being by this weekend. But I've got a few props already ready. I've got this giant trident, which if you've been watching the stream, I've shown before. This beast of a thing. Let me actually make the screen a bit bigger so you guys can see what I'm doing. Alright, so this was printed in multiple pieces. You can see if I bring it up close, there is some lines that need to be cleaned up right there. But it's all printed in multiple pieces. And there's the hole in the bottom. There's a dowel that goes in right there. This is pretty tall, but this was the first thing I printed for this project. It's almost as tall as I am. So you get an idea of how I started this. And there's the bottom. Long trident. Printed in 4 pieces on this guy right here. So I can take off these pieces and show you. Basically just cylinders and hollowed out so that the dowel can fit in. So that was the first piece I printed for this project. The next piece, some of you have already seen, was an articulated belt. So, where did I put that? Over here. And I was trying some paint tests on that. And they got a bit too dark for me. But you can see how it looks. It's printed on a netting. And if I show you the netting really closely, you can see that it's printed the first few layers just as is on the FDM printer here. Just started, paused the printer, applied the netting, and then let the rest of the printing continue so that all these pieces that have no connection to each other now appear to be articulated and can be worn. So that's basically the idea now, and the implementation will be implementing it to an entire suit. That's taking it to the next level. And what I found with this first test, which it became a good kind of dummy print for me to try some stuff on. I tried doing some painting where I applied like a black spray paint and then shiny gold on top of it. It's just a bit too dull for me now. So I want it to be a bit more gold and popping and saturated, so I might actually use the print color as is or just go straight gold. But the other thing is the netting I was using that was recommended, the nylon netting, is a bit too easy to fray and it comes off. Like I just ripped it right now like nothing. which means if I stitch this onto any clothing, it'll probably rip off. So I didn't want to deal with that, so I just printed it all over again. So let me show you the new print. All right. I like this part. It's like show and tell for 3D prints. So here's the new print. You can see I printed it in one go, 12 inch by 12 inch by 24 inch build volume, so I can just print it like this. And you can see close up that these first maybe 2 hours of layers or 3 hours of layers are just printed as is. Then I applied this netting, and this is a new netting. This is a wire mesh that is used for screen doors for your patio, and I just thought that it would make the perfect like unbreakable piece that I could, cut and then I could sew on to whatever I want to sew it onto, and it won't rip. So this is basically screen door fabric. You can get it at Home Depot, and that was just the most efficient use of this. I don't know, it's not efficient, just the most effective fiber mesh that I found that could work really well. So that's that piece. And I printed another piece over the weekend, which was the first set of scales. So you can see these are all scales that are not connected to each other. I've got them sculpted going in multiple directions, so it gives it the illusion of abs, because that's always nice in a superhero costume. And it bends really well. So if I actually wanted to make an arm piece out of this same thing, I could. I could theoretically use this same print to make the arm piece, which I actually end up might doing in order to save time, because it looks pretty dope. So that's one cool technique, and I learned this technique originally from a makerspace in LA. I'm forgetting the name of the original inventor of this technique, but then it was shown again to me. Let me shrink this screen back down. I like how I turn into Sean Connery sometimes. Shrink this screen back down. Alright. So if you want to see more of an in-depth tutorial on how to make that in particular, you can Google Uncle Jesse how to 3D print on fabric for cosplay. And he goes into detail on how to actually download some of these models from Thingiverse. I made my own, but how you can create this and then the step-by-step on how to make it happen. Alright, credit where credit is due. That's done. Put these aside for now. Alright, so now you've seen a bit of the background of this project, and I've been working on it for about, I'd say, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so. Just between other projects. I generally tend to take on a lot of projects at the same time, professional and personal, which I'm kind of trying to get rid of that habit. I'm trying to focus on now 2 or 3 projects, and that's about it. Okay. Got some family on here watching me too. Hey everyone. Nice to have you. Okay. Checking the Twitch chat, checking the Facebook chat. Hey everyone. Good to see you. Yeah, so if you have any questions, I'll check it time to time and I'll just, reply to your questions. But here's the start of the scale mail suit. And this is more of a concept than the actual final scales. And I'll show you how I'm going to go about creating the final scales and printing one of those pieces right now. The first thing I should show you is this, which is a 3D scan of me. And I did this using photogrammetry with very basic rudimentary knowledge that you need to have multiple photos taken from multiple angles, and then I stitched it together using Agisoft Pro. And that Agisoft is a awesome photogrammetry software, which by the state of the scan you can tell I've only just started picking it up. It really can yield amazing results based on what you input into it. So these are really okay photos taken on an iPhone with just natural lighting in a crowded space. So it didn't yield the best results, but it did get me the proportions I needed in order to work on a reasonable facsimile of me. So you can tell also just by the seam down the middle that I mirror and welded this. just to make it a bit easier to work with. I think the original scan is here. So you can see it's a bit more uneven. And when I started last week in the stream, I started by making just various different polygroups of scales, because each of those scale sets would be printed, I would think, on its own flat layer and then stitched onto the suit underlying it. But this basically became too much, I realized, as I was making it last week and then definitely the next day, because if I'm trying to get the shoot done this weekend, I don't have much time to wrap it all up. So what I'm gonna do, see, here's my gorget or gorget. I'm not sure the exact way to say that. This is where the belt's gonna go. I'm gonna turn off that piece up there. Turn on these scales. Alright, and for now I'm going to turn off these side belt pieces so we can actually get a sense of what it'll look like. That's basically going to be the suit. It's going to be form-fitted onto a underlying kind of Under Armour kind of shirt that I bought. And here's the shirt. You can tell it's actually kind of cool. It's got a bit of a fabric pattern going on already. It's skin tight, so it's got that going for it, but it's also already got a bit of a superhero-y thing going on with the way it's structured. So hopefully it'll add to it. We'll see. But now it's basically the main part that I'm on is trying to get these parts all printed, cut up, and stitched onto the suit as soon as possible. So what I did over the weekend, I was visiting a family in Chicago, so I was gone all weekend. I didn't want to just have no time to be working, so I had the printer work for me. I had the printer print out the entire gorget piece, which is this piece right here. Some pretty nifty spikes coming off along the edges, and spaces for me to insert all the infinity stones, except for the time stone. That one I'll probably put inside the trident. Time stone's the green one. Alright, Joanne Rigudo says, that's a really nice design. I think getting rid of the scales on the sides of the ribs and under the arms was a good choice. They'd probably be a little uncomfortable and interfere with your arms. That's true. I was thinking about that when I started making this. For example, I had done this piece, and I just naturally thinking about it. And this is the way you've got to think, being a 3D printing artist or being any artist that's making something practical. Is it going to be comfortable? You have to think about engineering. Will it print? You've got to think, will it be balanced? Will it, restrict your range of motion and movement? And this definitely would, because check out these spikes right here in this region. If they were on the suit, I really wouldn't be able to bend my arm up very much, my elbow, without those spikes just stabbing me. So you have to think about these things as part of your design or your design process. So I think that at least for a scaled down design, this could work really well. And I'm probably going to go for a front shot, so I'm not even going to worry about doing the back, because that's just how it goes sometimes. You got to do things quickly. All right. Hi, Balgav. Hi, Sabatot. Good to see you again. People checking in from all over the world. I'm in Los Angeles, so good morning for any of you that are on the western hemisphere of the United States. And good afternoon, evening, night for those of you tuning in around the world. Alright, so I printed this piece already, and to give you a history of this piece, let's see. I want to tell you where I got the idea to do this. And the best way to do that, I might actually have it saved here, my previous stream. Not that one. Nope, not that one either. Darn. I'll just pull it up. Let's see. So you can check out a bunch of my stuff on Instagram, Aiman Akhtar 3D. I post personal stuff on there as well as my project stuff. This was the first original idea of doing the Aquaman shoot because I always have been terrified of water, so I kind of want to push myself into getting scuba certified this year, getting trained properly on swimming, as well as just become more comfortable underwater. And here's the original idea that I got for my Infinity Gorget, I guess. Infinity, not Gauntlet, Infinity Gorget. This is my dog Kuma, and I made this piece for him just as a little fun side project. I've done stuff like that for him before, where I dressed him up in various types of armor. And then I think I've got here, I made like a Black Panther mask for him. Again, all printed on the Raise 3D N2 Plus here. Then I had to do a couple rounds of iteration to make sure I fit it, made vent holes, had the straps attached so it would be comfortable for him. And so that was my first foray into making armored suits using this printer. Much easier to start, excuse me, much easier to start on a dog because it's smaller. All right, so now that I've got that piece and I kind of adjusted it to fit me better and I printed it, let's see how it printed, because I basically set it to print and then I left over the weekend. So I was really hoping it didn't fail catastrophically when I came in this morning, because that can happen. And let's see what it looks like. So you can kind of get a sense. Here's the old Infinity Gauntlet slash collar for Kuma. See, scroll around to the back, there's the time stone that I put in there. Just like stones that I bought from a hobby shop. Not the ideal shape. This one should be more oval, but you may do in craft time. And now, there's the new piece in my printer right now. So let's start taking that out. So, I'm just going to pop the door open. Let's see if I can aim the webcam a bit better so you guys can see it. Not sure if it'll stay. Somewhat better. Alright. What I'm going to do is simply just remove the clips along the sides and pull the tray out, because it'll be easier to show you and work on this outside of the printer. Removing the top cover as well. Got some clips in on the side. Keep the build tray in place. And then it should just slide out. Now you can already tell from where you're looking at it that there's some wonky stuff happening. I'm going to turn the printer off for a second as well, because I don't want to hear this humming noise. Bit better. Alright, so let's take a closer look at what's happening here. So this is a fresh pull off my printer. You can see some of these support pieces have fallen off, which means the scales, the spikes that were supposed to be printing over there didn't really get started really well, and they kind of messed up. But that's okay. I'm just going to remove it and sculpt those back in with clay and just finish it off, because this is not a catastrophic failure at all. The problems that I've had all across the edges were with the supports attaching to the spikes. And I've noticed this multiple times with printing now in FDM, is that the whole printer shakes as it goes, and the connections from the supports to the actual print material are not that good. So in general, in future, now I'm going to be just making custom supports. I did try some tricks. You can see there's a little bit of this white putty that I was using to secure the bottom of the spike so that it would continue to print without any issue. But that didn't work clearly as well as I would have hoped. This is just simple Scotch removable mounting putty, and that's really useful for a lot of stuff. But didn't really yield me the results I needed. However, the print itself looks really good. So the front, back, the sides, all of that came out really nicely. So I think despite the spikes having their issues, I could probably rip them off here. You can see even when they did attach to the supports, it's not ideal, it's not perfect. There's some build lines. So I'm just going to do some hand sculpting and make this practically fit and work together. And then when I paint it all up, it'll be seamless. As long as you get 95% of the way there with the print, you should be happy. And now I know that if I were to do this in the future, custom supports, because it looks like only one of like most of the spikes worked from scratch, and that's basically because it was more horizontal of a spike. Anything that's going from a small point up to a large point, the FDM is not like stereolithography where the supports actually attach. It's more like the print just starts sitting on top of the supports and hopes to, keep it together. But now I'm going to basically remove this from the print bed and clean it up a little bit and get started on setting up the next print, which will be one of these scale sets. So you can see how I'm going to go about doing that. Hope you guys like my Kool-Aid shirt. Oh yeah. See if I can make some space here on my computer desk to let you guys see what's happening. It's the first time trying this. Alright, neat. Kind of sort of works. You can see where how I'll be removing this from the print bed. Okay, so tools. I'll be using a spatula. Simple, really. Old school tool for lifting things up. I've also got, from the Form 2 printer, a little levering tool. And this is basically used for getting under a print and then just popping it off. So I can do that. So I can use a bit combination of both of these tools to pop this off. And what I'm basically looking to do is get under the edge of the, let's see, how should I describe this? There's kind of like a base that's made that the print rests on top of. For example, with my scales or my belt, this was the base. So this is the bottom end of the base. Here's the top end. And then the print sits on top of this. So you can either rip off from the bottom of this or you can separate the print off of the top of the base. Really, either way works. First thing I can do is just try to do a bit of manhandling. Make sure that these pieces that are loose, I can rip those out. Not even worry about those. So you can see just with my hands I can rip a bunch of these pieces off, which gives you an idea of how the supports in FDM printing don't really connect very well to their print. So custom support is definitely the way to go in the next print. Always try to learn from your print failures and print mistakes, because that's kind of how most of printing is learned. 3D printing right now, it's making the crossover from being a hobbyist to a professional tool, but it's not quite there yet. Like one day we'll all have like Star Trek style replicators, but until then it's basically learning the proper processes on how to print and the best practice. And you should learn from people like me who have gone through the effort of failing multiple times already, so you don't have to. Alright, so just sticking my tool here underneath the, I should really learn the actual terminology for what this is called. The bottom piece that is generated to sit the print on top of. I'm going to try to do it from multiple angles, so it's not just multiple sides, I mean. And there we go. Pop right off. We've got a couple of these still there, but at least the print is off. So I'll deal with those later. Let's put this back on. Okay. Now, you can see how it's connected to the supports on the bottom end. Now, FDM printing doesn't really need supports when the print is flat on the print bed, but when it's not, it definitely does. So I'm basically just using my hands here to pop the supports a little bit off the base because they come off really easily. You can see that. They're just kind of slipping right off. Yeah. That's one thing I like about FDM printing, is that the cleanup is way easier. In stereolithography, resin-based printing, you have to do a lot more work because there's resin and there's isopropyl alcohol. There's all sorts of weird stuff that you have to post-process the prints with. All right, so here we go. Here's the print. You can see all the spikes along the edges have issues. So it'll be a fun day of sculpting for me one of these mornings to just finish off these spikes because don't really have time to do a print from scratch. Looks like one of the spikes came out well, just that one, and everything else kind of just meh, did that. So custom supports next time, but I think I'll be able to salvage this. Let's do the actual important test, which is the wearing test to see if it fits me. All right. I'm kind of watching myself in the stream camera. And if I do that for you guys, it kind of does this cool, like, infinity effect. But okay, that looks pretty neat. It sits pretty comfortably on my shoulders. And that's why you use the scan, really. You use the scan so you know your own proportions and how to build to you. A little bit of give, that's good, because I can use the suit to fill that in. And so now it'll be just a matter of maybe drilling some holes into the bottom end of this and then running my stitching through there. But luckily, it sits on me, so that's good. And once I finish these spikes, paint it all up, glue in the stones, have the rest of the suit, hopefully it'll work. All right, so pretty not stoked about this, but this was almost a 40-something hour print, printing just upside down. So I'm happy that most of it came out good. All right. So with that settled, now we're going to go back to printing more scale patches because I need to have those done as well. And I'm hoping to have all my prints done by Wednesday. So I've got, let's see, let's scale this down again. Okay, so just looking in ZBrush here, I've got the belt done. So actually, let's do a quick marker of what is done, and let's see how we can pull this off in time. I'm just going to color them green. So that's done. That's done. That's done. So I need to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 patches. So for now, let's turn those red so I know what needs to happen. I'm just going to color and fill object in here to do this quickly. So green being done, red being still to print. We've got a few more pieces to go. So I haven't actually prepped these yet, so you can see the process of me coming up with the concept here. But now let's take it from the concept to the actual reality. So ideas to reality, like the name of the class. Let me clean up my workspace here for a second, remove all this stuff. It's unfortunate that with PLA still, most of this is kind of junk. You can't do anything with it. But material scientists are working on this stuff all the time to make new materials that hopefully will be reusable, recyclable, and you don't create too much trash. I try not to. I try to recycle as much of this stuff as I can. Alright, meanwhile, while I'm cleaning this up, let's check if there's any questions going on Facebook or Twitch. Alright, Savage King is asking on Facebook, what's the model of that 3D printer? All right. So that is the, let's open this up here, Raise 3D N2 Plus. So here's the printer. It's a dual extruder, 12-inch by 12-inch by 24-inch, compatible with most filaments, ABS, and FDM. It comes with Raise 3D's own software idea maker, which is really useful for sending a print directly to the printer. And it's Wi-Fi. It's got all the nice bells and whistles and features. It's around $3,500. And the cool thing about it is that it's basically the same price as a Form 2 for stereolithography. That's the other printer I have. This is the Form 2. And the Form 2 is really great for printing smaller scale because the build volume is only like 7 inches, but it can print really, really detailed. So you can do dental stuff, you can do jewelry, you can do real vinyl toy prototyping, all on that printer. And I get commissioned often to do larger scale maquettes, which I will still do on the Form, but I'll do them in pieces. So I'll slice and key and part, larger prints out so that I can make a larger print, even using the smaller build volume. Okay, trying to salvage some of my putty here so I don't waste all that, because that putty is useful. Sticking stuff to other stuff. All right. Cool. Desk area cleaned. Let's get back to it. So both of these are in the, I'd say, semi-professional or hobbyist category of printers still. They're desktop printers. They can create really fine results once you learn how to use them really well. And I just got the Raise 3D, so I'm just trying to push it and see where it breaks, which is why I'm finding the breaks. But it is a really solid printer because the Trident printed out perfectly, for example, printed out perfectly. A lot of the pieces, if you orient them and support them properly, print out perfectly. And that's the nature of new printers. You've got to figure out what that line is. All right, Kyle for Pixelogic is on here. Hey, Kyle. Kyle's been helping me out get all set up. All right, Blondes is saying, I love seeing this coming together. It's awesome. Thank you. I don't even know how to say this. T Cherokee, T Cherokee says, don't go breaking through any walls. Can't guarantee that. Let's see. Count Quadula is asking on Twitch, are the FDM scraps reusable? The build area looks giant. Can you print a dino skull? Yes. So it is a dual extruder printer. You can hot swap the filaments along the way, so you can print really big, and you can use up the entire build volume. Now, actually, I think they've got some examples of using the entire build volume. I don't know where they are. Maybe if I look in images. Because you can get some really, really, really big prints off of this thing. Yeah, I've seen some prints that use up the entire build volume. I personally haven't done one. Here's an example. So this was printed in one go on the N2 Plus. Probably took a day or two, but you can see how dense, how big, and how wide you can make something that's so tall. You can probably make it a bit taller, about like the height of his eyes, because it's got a 24-inch build volume, so you can go even taller. But the Form's my baby also, because I've been using it for the longest time. And honestly, what matters with 3D printing companies, no matter who you choose, there's all sorts of printers on the market now. There's a lot of Kickstarters on the market. But I'd highly recommend using an existing 3D printing company because that has good customer service. That's what it boils down to, because your printer breaks, you have issues where you can't figure out what's causing a failure, and you need someone to bounce ideas off of. So it's really important to have that support right now. And Raise 3D and Form Labs are really good customer service companies. Or they have been. Can't guarantee it forever, you know? Okay. So, Silent and Hero saying, will you be talking about smoothing methods you prefer for PLA FDM prints? Mayhaps. I don't know if I'll have a lot of time to cover that stuff. Definitely not today. I basically do sanding. So I do multiple rounds of sandpaper with different grits so I can get it really nice and smooth. Then I can apply some solution, something like XTC 3D. That's a pretty nice one for smoothing. So that is the Smooth On product line, XTC 3D, where you can apply this. It's a two-part liquid. You mix it and then you apply it onto your surface on your FDM prints. It completely smooths out your surface, and then you can go another round of sanding and it'll really get rid of any build lines. So I really like this, but FDM printing is, in my opinion, I'm not trying to get the perfect form finish out of it. If I want perfect clean finish, I'll use my Form 2. But for XTC 3D is really great for filling in build lines and smoothing your stuff out. And then you can spray paint on top of that, which adds another layer of smoothing out. So that's Smooth On. That's one company that makes this kind of thing. And that's basically my workflow for smoothing. Sanding, XTC, sanding, spray paint, done. All right. Let's check the questions on Facebook. Quasio Kennedy is asking, is it currently possible to reuse material? Same thing. It depends on the filament you have. There are different types of filament that, for example, there's a wood filament, which I imagine could be reusable in some sense. There's new filaments coming out in new materials that will be completely reusable. For example, there was this 3D artist last year. Let's see. I can pull this up for you guys. Okay, so there was this Kickstarter last year for this filament called CX5. The creator unfortunately took ill and wasn't able to finish and get everything out, but it was fully funded because this filament is something that you can print and then you can actually heat up and start sculpting. So this was a really, really fun idea, and I've used CX5 clay in the past. Adam Bean, the sculptor and the creator of this campaign, he's an excellent sculptor, and you can see, even if you get a janky print, just through heating it up with a, let's say, a hair dryer or something like that, you can get in there and then start sculpting the details. And so it is a very reusable filament, and if you don't like what you get, just heat it up into mush, and then you can use it just like a block of CX5. So there are lots of new filaments coming out. And I think the Adam Bean will actually try to finish this off and hopefully get it out to the people once he's feeling a bit better. Doing a Kickstarter myself, I know how stressful it can be. All right. But certain materials is possible to reuse, yes. Most, no. Unfortunately, it's not there yet in terms of material. I have a whole bag of filament material that I've been collecting the scraps so that I can either find a way to recycle it or incorporate it into a different art project, maybe an installation piece or something. Okay. Answered questions on Facebook. Answered questions on Twitch. Cool. All right, so let's keep rolling on this project. It is now 8:45. I'm going to be going till 10 a.m. Let's play some music while we work on this stuff. All right. So what I want to do now, let's make sure that my screen is small enough and you guys can see what I'm working on. Cool. Let's prepare some more of these patches for print. And so you can see now how I'm going to be going from this concept, which was basically thinking about which direction the scale should flow. And ZBrush is an awesome tool for figuring that out too. Because I think in 3D, I think in sculptural form. So for me, it's really nice to come into ZBrush and think about what direction these scales are going and how I want them to flow. The shoulder piece, for example. And then I can come into thinking about the actual scales, how far spaced out they'll be from each other, and what the actual final print pieces will look like. Here's the final print piece for the abs plate and the scales. So you can see I'm printing this flat with all these scales decimated down, printing all just like this. But in order to do this, I need to first create a plate. And this is the plate that I'll be using to generate my scales on top of. And I'll just send this to print just like this. So I'm not going to send it to print using the plate, but I need to start by creating a plate that's matched to the dimensions of my body here. So I basically took measurements of my body and figured out what size these plates need to be for each of these scales once they're splayed out. I also made a shoulder plate, which is right here. And the way I made these plates, I mean, ideally I could have had more time to come up with a better workflow. I was thinking I wanted to use the 3D scan itself and then use something like Marvelous Designer, which is a really nice fabric, how should I say this? It's a really nice fabric simulation software. But what I wanted to do was have these scales go through Marvelous Designer on the surface, apply some sort of constraint to them in Maya, and then flatten them out using a blend shape so that at least I'd have the proper dimensions and the proper scale all done algorithmically through software. Unfortunately, didn't have time, which often happens when you're juggling work and multiple projects. So I am doing a lower fi technique, which is to use this mesh material that I got, which is relatively see-through, you guys can see that, and I applied it onto my body on top of the suit while wearing the suit to figure out where I'd be actually making these plates. So I actually made some quick mock-ups because that's just the most efficient way of doing it. Here's the mock-ups that I made, and you won't be able to see much on the webcam quality camera. But, for example, here's the piece that I did for the gut, and I kind of just put it on here and had my wife help me actually draw lines in marker so we could see where the pieces would actually go. And yeah, I'm not even going to bother showing you this because you won't see on the webcam, but this is basically the step one in order to measure and get the actual lines for where I want stuff to be. Step two, in this low budget workflow, is to trace it onto paper. So I basically applied this on top of a paper, and then I traced it out, and then I cut it. So now you can see this a bit better. You can tell where the scale plate is going to be. And this is what I use to generate the abs plate you see here. So this piece of paper was measured, created in 3D, and then that's what I use to insert mesh, draw these scales on. So that was my workflow from start to finish to create one of these plates. I've got a bunch of new plates here. This one's for the shoulder piece. Oh no, this one's actually for the chest pieces. The shoulder piece and the forearm piece look like this. Now I might not have time to do forearm pieces, so I might end up doing the, you know, the one you see right now, the abs plate printed again, and just use that. But this is basically the shoulder piece. So, since we've got the shoulder plate already here, let's see if I've imported it into my, here we go. There's the abs plate and the abs scales in the same subtool. And so you can get a sense of, that was my original concept idea of, you know, it'd be cool to have some scales here. Let's draw them. And okay, now that I've got the flat plate, I can start thinking about, oh, you know what, it'll be really cool to have them go in multiple directions. So you can actually get a sense of abs under there. So if I do a quick paint over, you can get an idea of what I mean. I'm going to duplicate this subtool. And since it's all decimated right now, I'm going to Dynamesh it so I can start giving you an idea of how I'm going to poly paint it. All right, Dynamesh done. Now I have a bit more resolution to work with. So I can come into here, just use my standard tool, maybe just use a color spray, no alpha. Lower the RGB intensity. So this is going to be all kind of this color. So I'm going to fill this in, maybe a little bit duller. There we go. Let's fill it in with full intensity. And then go with a little bit of a darker color. Come in with lower intensity. Scale this up. Turn off my Z add. That doesn't help. Okay. Lower the size of this down. So if I do something like this, very subtle painting, already this will help pop it up a bit. Pop it from its existing colors. So, give the sense that I have more of a six-pack than I actually do. Just by adding some subtlety. So you can see just by this technique, I can create a much more interesting and engaging plate. And obviously this is me just showing you what I do in real life once I get to the painting stage, which I'm shooting for maybe, I don't know, Thursday? Alright, so that'll be the stomach plate. Now let's go on to look at some of the other plates, because I still need to print all these red ones, right? Here's the shoulder plate. And you can see once I actually had the time to sit and think about it, I thought it would be really interesting to have different scales of the scales, different sizes. You know, the more, what is the word, randomness you add, the more chaos, the more realistic something looks. I want it to be very designed, obviously. And this is not the shoulder plate, this is the chest plate. I should really rename that properly. Chest scales and chest plate. So I'm going to print two of these guys. The way I did this, obviously, if you want to see that too, is I made a custom insert mesh brush, which you guys can see in the previous stream. It's insert mesh scale, and I have a few different types of scales on there. I've got this really tall pointy one, and I've got a not so pointy flatter one that I made. And just by using this to lay it out, I can create different types of scales, different types of scale patterns, and then figure out what I like. Figure out what direction I want things to flow. Just do this kind of on the fly, you know. I can even go the opposite direction. So if I wanted to do some more evil looking plate, it would do something like this, where I'd have more of the sharp ones, more pieces going in multiple different directions. And the good thing is, once you're done with one of these, drawing them on, you can still select them with the transpose mesh and then move them around. So you can give it, you know, enough space so that it won't be intersecting with each other. And then when you print using the wire method, the wire mesh frame method, I don't really know what to call that method yet, then it'll all print really well. So that's basically my workflow on how I go about making these scale sets. And so this is for my chest piece, and I'll be using these scales here. I can now export these and get these started ready for print. So let me show you that process. Here's the chest scale. I can actually select using my handy dandy ruler here and see what the tallest point is from top to bottom. If I just do a quick measurement here, this appears to be about 8 inches tall. So 8 inches from left end to right end. So from sternum to the insertion point under the deltoid muscle is about 8 inches. And that's going to be the tallest point. And that's really all you need in ZBrush, because ZBrush is relatively smart software. And you can come here to Z plugin, 3D Print Hub. Let me make sure this is decimated. It is. Under Z plugin 3D Print Hub, I can set my scale and I can figure out what scale I want these to print. So I'm working at scale, but just to double check and to make sure that it prints all well, you want to export this at the right scale. So I'm going to click on inches. I'll update size ratios. And I want the longest point here to be set to 8 inches because that's the point from top to bottom. And I'm going to go to export this. And let's try this a few different times to see what happens. So I'm just going to select inches and click export to STL. And I'll call this chest scales 1. You know what? Before I do that, let me make sure my export options is set to only the one that's selected. I don't need to export polypaint. And now let's export to STL. See, chest scales, test 1. Count Quadula is saying I may have to purchase the final plate from you. Is the only way I'll have abs. All right, cool. Here's my Idea Maker software. Here you can see the way I had prepped the gorget to print before I left. You can see all the spikes went down to the bottom, but several of them didn't reach the bottom of the build plate. So if I clear these supports, you can see how some of these pieces are just floating. And that's why I had added all those supports so that it would be able to print the spikes. But what I'm learning now, after having worked with this printer now for a month, is that long flat pieces, kind of like, let's see here, kind of like this, those work well with supports because there's a lot of area so that you can do supports and it'll print fine. But small areas, kind of like this spike here, when you're trying to get supports and this is the only area that they're allowed to attach to, even if you attach a few more, they're not really attached. So when it's going from small to big and it's printing really fast, you know, unlike stereolithography where a support here will be fused, with FDM it's not fused. So I'm going to start making custom supports where I actually have kind of a triangle going from top to bottom here. And that way, at least, it's part of the model, and I can just clip it off, and I know it'll print. Because you need an FDM for it to start generally flat on the print bed. Yeah, so spikes like this, you know, it's kind of, they're way high off the print bed. So printing something like that, it's probably best to print it as a separate piece and key it on in the future. All right, so for now, I don't need this. I'm going to open up a new scene. All right, it's thinking too hard. So I'm just going to exit and open it up again. A new version of Idea Maker available. We'll have to update that soon. All right, so exported the chest plate, chest scales test. So let's open that up. And I exported in inches. I usually work in millimeters, so let's see what this turns out. All right, so it's saying that it's way too small because it's bringing it in, despite exporting it inches, at a very, 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 very tiny scale. However, I can adjust this because it brought it in as millimeters. So if I just do a quick scale, let's see, inches to millimeters, 8 inches is 203 milliliters. So I'll do 203.2. And there's my 8-inch chest plate. So actually, you know what? This works fine for me. Want to make sure that this print is printing on platform. So I'll click that button to flatten it down onto the print bed. And since I'm short on time, I may actually do this such that I print 2 at a time. See, duplicate this by pressing Control D, copy the model, and then just move it into place. In theory, I could print 2 of these in the same time. Whenever you can do that, you should try, because, well, depends. Not always. There's no such thing as always when it comes to 3D printing. Yep, this way. Got to make sure both of these fit in the print area. This one's not even on the platforms. Make sure they're both on platform and they're not intersecting with each other. All right. All right, so there are some errors that it's finding in this print, probably as artifacts from the decimation, and maybe some clipping of the edges that I did. So I can just click on Repair here and see what it does. Apply Auto Repair to my models. And this is the Idea Maker software that comes with the Raise 3D printer. Formlabs has their own version. It's called Preform, and that's really nice because there's actually a button in the 3D Print Hub, Send to Preform, and you can send it directly to print on the Formlabs version of this software, print prep software. All right, Joanne's asking, would it be better to print those spikes separately and then glue them onto the gorget? Yes, that's probably true. That would have been better. I was in a rush getting out the door to head out to Chicago this weekend, so I just set it to print and let's see what happens. The one good thing about FDM is that it's very cheap. So that entire gorget here, this entire print is probably in the order of $10. So not even, you know, so I don't mind having a $10 failure personally because I'm used to, you know, learning by sending stuff to the printer and finding where the breaking point is. Now that I know what the breaking point for these spikes is, I know next time to make my own custom upside down spikes so that it'll work, or print them separately like you said, key and glue them on. I don't know if I have time enough to do that before this weekend shoot. So yes, that's one good thing is that with FDM, it's very reasonable material cost. The Formlabs, on the other hand, the material is very expensive. The resin for 1 liter is about $150, $200. So I'm more careful about what I send to print. I do most of my prototyping on the Formlabs relatively small because this print is already $1 or $2 worth of material, you know? I don't know. It actually might be more like $5 worth of material. So you can tell the scale is, FDM is way better for prototyping cheaply. All right, so this is taking a while to repair my models. While it's doing that, I can move back onto here and start thinking about some of these other patches that I have to make. So belt's good. Cool. Forearm pieces, you know, I'm going to come back to that because I kind of like what's happening with the chest piece as the forearm piece. I already know that's kind of a quantity that I can measure, and I can see how well it fits and how well it comes onto my arm. So this actually might be the way to go and not do forearm pieces in order to save time. It looks pretty badass too. So skip the forearm pieces for now. Let's go to the shoulder pieces. This definitely needs to be done. Just need to remember which piece of these, I should have labeled these, was shoulder and which was forearm. I should probably try that on the actual shirt to make sure. You can tell, like any project, when you're working on it on the fly, or coming up with it as you go, which is often the case in 3D printing. It's a lot of just measuring, testing, trying, seeing what works, trying again. This looks like the right piece. Let's try the other one. Okay. Okay, this looks like way more like the shoulder piece to me. Yeah, it fits along with the flow of the existing material much better. So this is the shoulder piece. So I'm actually going to label this right now before I forget. Get my marker, label it shoulder piece. All right. So this is still repairing models. This may have crashed, which can happen. I should go ahead and just start creating the shoulder piece. So I love ZBrush for sculpting, and with the new modeling Z Modeler, it's a really great tool for detailing as well as hard surface. However, I tend to do more of my need to measure stuff in Maya. So I'm gonna basically duplicate my shoulder chest plate there, and I'm gonna use it to create my shoulder plate. Let's see, easiest way to do this is probably to plug in an image and use that as an image plane to build on top of. So let's do that. I'll take a photo quickly. Top view, top down on it. All right, put this off to the side. I'm going to send myself the photo I just took. All right, so Silent Hero is asking, going back to making the base plate for the scales, can you retopo a plate on top of the scan of the body and then flatten that for the base? That was my original idea. Basically using this body, not the chest piece. Let's find the shoulder piece here. Nope, nope. There it is. Okay. All right. So the original idea that I had was similar to your Silent Hero on Twitch, was to basically work off of the scan and use ZBrush's tools to retopologize this patch right here and generate only that geometry. Then flatten that out in order to actually using Marvelous Designer to generate it basically at curved form and then flatten it out using, you know, what is it called? The simulation. So that it basically would retain the same length, because then you want it to be accurate, you know, you want it to be exact. And I haven't had time to experiment with Marvelous Designer to do that. So since I'm missing that part of the workflow, just using it for retopologizing but not having the simulation aspect to go from curved to flat figured out, it doesn't make sense to do it that way. So it makes more sense to start from scratch with a photo. So I'm going to go ahead and send myself that photo I just took, and we'll load it up as an image plane. Call the shoulder, send. See any questions on Facebook? Nope. All right, cool. Any questions on Twitch? Nope. All right, cool. Thanks to everyone for joining me here. It's an honor to be doing this stuff for ZBrush. Checking my email, make sure I get this. Here it is, shoulder plate. I'm gonna download that image. Yeah, and I'm just gonna crash this because this repairing is taking way too long. So back in ZBrush here, I could try to repair the model myself in a few different ways. So here's the model that I'm exporting. So let's look at only that one. I've got my settings already set. Actually, you know what? I've already exported it. So what I could do is open it up in Mesh Mixer, which is another software which I use for my repairs. Import that in there. Chest scales 1. And let that generate the mesh, repair it in Mesh Mixer, export it out as an STL again, and then open it up in Idea Maker. So I can avoid the one repair process. Yeah, here you can see what the problems are. In Mesh Mixer, since I had to use the clip brush along the edge in ZBrush, it flattened some pieces way too thin, so it's created non-manifold geometry and just kind of loose hanging pieces. So I can go to the Analysis, Inspector, and these are the things it's identified. Just click Auto Repair All. And there you go. Now I've got a repaired mesh. So now I can go to File, Export. I want to save this in Aquaman Cosplay Project. Let's save it at Chest Scales Test 2. Alright, I've got the scan here. Here's the photo I just took of my shoulder piece, just going top down. And I don't need to be insanely precise with this because I'm not actually printing the plate. I'm printing the scales on top of the plate. So there'll be some wiggle room there along the edges. But that's actually a pretty good image plane reference. I'm going to go ahead to create a new folder because this is my 5th stream with ZBrush. Alright, stream 5. Back in Maya. I can go to the front view because I believe I want to do this in the front view. Add an image plane. Got some of these menus opening on the other screen. Not the Move Tool settings. Still getting used to the updated Maya. Maya 2018 here. Interesting. Could have sworn I had already made an image plane in order to generate these ones. So that should already exist. But I can't seem to find it in the attribute editor. Let's see. Image plane. Now I could create an image plane in a few different ways, but I wanted to create it from the camera. So let's go in the front camera, and should be right here under the Create Image Plane, Import Image. And I'm going to scroll down to ZBrush Streaming, Stream 5. There's the shoulder that I got. Bring that in. Perfect. Scale that around, rotate it into place. I'll adjust the scale perfectly upon export in ZBrush. It's a good thing about being in a hurry when you're doing these things. You work fast. Alright, I'm going to hide the grid, so I don't need to see that for now. And I'll just start moving this into place. I can press 4 in Maya to kind of just hide my view. And move these pieces over here. Good old-fashioned vertex modeling. Still a useful tool in any modeler's toolkit. You know what? I'm going to put this image plane into its own layer. and then reference it so that I don't keep selecting it. Alright, so I'm going to take a sec to just align all these vertices along the edge of my image plane for the shoulder part. And now, is this the best workflow for what I'm doing? Maybe, not necessarily, but it is the one I'm most familiar with. And when you're in a time crunch, you make do. I'm just going to move these all along the edge. Pretty much trying to limit myself to using the controllers, the gizmo, so to speak. ZBrush just added an awesome gizmo tool there as well. Make sure I line all these up along the edge. If you guys have any questions, just shout them out in the Twitch or Facebook, and I'll answer them there. Might have been easier to start a new model from scratch here, but since I already had the existing plate that I had made earlier for the chest, it just made sense to start with what I had. Speed's the name of the game oftentimes in production. And I've been a production modeler for a long time. Well, 10 years. Long time is subjective. I probably don't need both of these edges. Could come in and merge some of these vertices if I want. You know what? It's fine. I could probably just delete them. Nope, that'll cause too much of a pain in the ass. It'll work. All right, let's test this. When I smooth it, that's what matters. When I press the 3 button to check the subdiv, looks like it's pretty accurate, or pretty close to accurate to my mesh. Just for the sake of a bit more even topology layout, which is not really necessary, but when you bring it into ZBrush with the extra smoothing, it helps to have your topology a bit more evenly laid out, so that, and all quads, so that it gives you a good base to draw on. But I'm probably going to crank it up to 1,000,000 or so polys, so that shouldn't matter much. Scale this up and around, move it this way. Alright, neat. So that should give me the results I'm looking for. Let's head this back to ZBrush now. So I'm going to select this mesh. Might add another edge loop here, so it gives me a bit more of a clean clean point, because I want that point. I don't want to lose that. Use the multi-cut tool. Just cut a couple of edges directly in there. Good thing about working in for 3D printing is that topology doesn't matter for basic things like base plates. Alright, so I'm going to select that. I'm going to go to Mesh Smooth so that it's higher res. I'll go to File, Export Selection as shoulder plate as an OBJ. Let's head back into ZBrush. Alright, so this is already exported out of Mesh Mixer after being cleaned up as well. So let's jump to Idea Maker for a second and do that part first. Yes, I know. Alright, chest scale test 2. Open that up. Alright, so that's the fixed piece. I don't see any non-manifold edges or error orientation on the faces here. Model's giving the passing grade. It's just a matter of scaling it up to the right height, which we had earlier determined in millimeters was 203.2. So there's the 8-inch chess piece. And you know what? I would print this using the whole print bed, but just for the sake of not just saving times, but also making sure that we do our due diligence and this one piece prints and works well, I don't want to rush it. So let's just print the one mesh at a time, and then we'll print the second one. So I'll leave this as is, make sure that it is, no, not scale, I want to be on move. Make sure that this is on platform. And I'm going to go to my, I don't need to add any support. So this is already the right scale, and it's got the right orientation, and the layout is good. So now, and I've already done the repair, but in a different software, Mesh Mixer. So now let's do a quick slicing. Slicing is basically turning this 3D mesh into a series of 2D meshes, plates, that is the information that will be translated into G code and sent into the printer. So I've got a few different options: high quality, standard, speed, more infill. These are ones that I've created custom, but right now I'll just go with the standard speedy option. For 1.75 millimeter PLA, that's the length of my filament, and V2, that's the second hot end. So I'll click slice. All right, so here's the slice complete. You can already tell this is estimated to use $2.64. That's why I love FDM printing. This is a big piece. It covers my entire chest, or one side of my, I don't know what this part is called anymore, my one side of my breast. $2.64 is the estimated price. So FDM printing is really great for prototyping for this kind of thing. And so an entire scale mail cosplay suit, you know, entire whole body piece would still be not that expensive. It's estimated to use print for 7 hours and use 88 grams of the filament, which is 1,000 grams in a liter. So I'm happy with this. Let's do a preview to see what the slicing looks like. You can scale up. Check this out. There's the slicing. We can actually go layer by layer with one of these sliders. There we go. See how it's going to be printing. And you can see the insides of this mesh will be printing hollow, automatically creating the scaffolding that needs to be printed. That's one thing I really like about Idea Maker. It'll tell you which direction the filament will be drawn in. One layer it'll do in that direction, then the other direction, so horizontal and vertical. You can check out the inside, see how it's going to be really densely packed. You can adjust the thicknesses, adjust the hollowing. You can adjust even the size of the filament. I can print in a smaller extruder head, and it would print even finer detail. Already with this printer, I'd say the finest resolution, given enough time, will print at 100 micron resolution on a Form 2. So it's actually, FDM printing is catching up with stereolithography slowly but surely in the amount of quality you can get out of the printer directly. So this looks great to me. It's going to start by printing this base, and then it's going to, scaffolding I guess would be called, and then it's going to print our scales on top of it. Looks like not all the pieces even require scaffolding, which is interesting. If everything's flat on the print bed, everything should require scaffolding. So I'm going to double check this, because that's not right. Some of these scales look to be lower than the others. And this is why you do the check, to make sure you catch this kind of thing. So just looking at it along the side, I can tell not all these scales are the same base height. So that's a mistake that I made in ZBrush, which I'll have to correct first before I can, actually, you know what, I can correct it in Mesh Mixer too. Go off to the side here, scale it up, And I want to make sure the bottom of these are all aligned. Some of these are higher, some of these are lower. If I go into ZBrush and see how I drew them onto the plate, I can get a better sense of why that happened. So I missed a step here. Let's go back to my chest plate. Undo drawing all these. All right. Check in ZBrush by clicking on the transparency mode, and I can see where I've got all these scales drawing onto the chest plate. So what I want to do first, before I even export this out, is to make sure that everything is flat, everything is on the same plane. Easiest way to do that is to go to my clip brush. So I'll go to my clip curve by holding Control-Shift, and I should be able to clip them all down by just dragging this out to the same end. This will generate a few problems likely, but I should be able to repair those. So it looks like they're all on the same plane, but some of them may still not be. Let's check. Yeah, so by clipping I was able to fix and adjust some of these, but not all of them. I want to make sure I get all of them. This happens when you're using an insert mesh and you have different depth. So you go to your brush depth slider and you can adjust how much the depth is. Not only that, afterward you can still move and transpose these pieces. So that's why you can generate different depths for these. Now I want to make sure they're all flat against the same surface. So first thing I'll do is go to Geometry Dynamesh and Dynamesh these, because I don't want to be working on the decimated ones. I want to be working on the Dynamesh ones. Okay. All right, all Dynamesh. Let's go ahead and select my Mask Rectangle tool. That's another tool I can use to just grab along the edges. And so then I can see, okay, now it is grabbing all of them. So that's good. So I can try to figure out what my exact point is. All right, so you can see these two scales are a bit higher off the edge than the other ones. That's these two big ones, one of the ones I was drawing last. So the first thing I'll do is just select both of these scales, come along the edge, just push them in a bit. Now when I draw my mask, they should work. All right, so now I've got my edges masked. They're all coming to the same edge. I can use the clip brush, or I can use the Move Transpose tool to kind of use them to just scale all down to the one end. Another thing I can do is with these selected, because you can see it generates a bit of a very flat, thin edge, which I don't like. I can polygroup just the mask. So I'm going to group masked. For you guys, I've got a bit of a custom interface, so I can just click here, but for you guys, it's under polygroups, group masked. And so I've got now a different polygroup on the bottom and the top. So I can just Control-Shift-Click, and it'll select only the edge. Then I can go to Delete Hidden, and it'll delete that bottom edge. And then when I Dynamesh again, it'll fill it in. So that way I won't have any of those loose edges along the edge, and it shouldn't give me as much trouble when I print either. I'm going to use my smooth brush to tap along the edges. Make sure these are nice and smoothed out. And for the sake of ease, I might inflate these a little bit. That looks good. Dynamesh again. I'm doing auto groups as well. Check that All of these are on their own poly group. That works. Sweet. That means nothing is interconnected. Nothing is meshing with each other. All right, that looks good. I can come into my Dynamesh, my standard tool with the RGB intensity set to full. Just fill that in. That's looking much cleaner now. Save this scene. Scale mail shirt, let's call this 4. Game art saying, why don't you use the clip tool using the other side of the move tool? So yeah, that works too. The move tool has a clipping feature if you use this side of the transpose bar versus this side. There's so many ways to do some things in ZBrush, it's hard to like remember which way is best. Often boils down to just preference for me in any case. All right, so just smoothing these out at the bottom. This looks good. All right, now we're ready to decimate these. So I'm going to go to Z plugin, not the 3D Print Hub. I'm going to go into Decimation Master and pre-process and decimate. Sword of Sadness on Twitch is asking, is a tablet a must for sculpting? I don't know how to answer that question. Kinda, because sculpting in ZBrush in particular, it's about pressure sensitivity. So the harder you push down, the more you want your model to interact. The more you want it to either carve using the damn standard brush, the more you want it to inflate using the inflate, or pull and push out. So you need some sort of pressure sensitivity. Mice don't provide that pressure sensitivity unless you're using like a fancy 3D mouse. So I'd recommend a tablet. I was working on a Wacom regular Intuos tablet for years until I could afford a Cintiq. So you don't need to go high end right away. You can go low end and get like, there's cheap like $100 bamboo tablets that work just as well. All right, so this is now pre-processed. I can go to decimate now and decimate it down. Might decimate it down a bit more than 30%. Let's go to 20. Make sure that I'm not getting any weird edges. Nope, that looks good, and it's 200,000 polys. You can see how it's all decimated down in ZBrush. So now this is ready to export out again. So I'll go to my 3D Print Hub, exporting out at 8 inches. Let's try in millimeters now, 203.2, and export this out to STL. Hopefully I won't need to repair this. So let's go with chest scales. What was the last one I named? I named it chest scales test 2. So let's name this one chest scales test 3. All right, now back in Idea Maker. No, this is Mesh Mixer. Let's go back to Idea Maker. I'll delete that model. I'll import the model that I want. So let's add it. Chest scales test 3. Open that up and see what happens. All right, now this time, since I exported out of ZBrush as millimeters, Idea Maker, since it's already set to millimeters here, it already brought it in at the right height and right scale. So your units really matters when it comes to 3D printing, and most 3D printing software is built on the metric system, so learn it. It's just useful to know. All right, now this is looking good. It's already given me the passing grade, so now I can just go straight to my slice. Actually, no. Let me make sure that it's on the platform. Move it into place, right in the center, on platform, there we go. And then now we can go to slice. Just using the fastest setting. I'm not going high quality because I don't have time. And I think once I actually sand them, spray them down, it'll look good. All right, Sam Peterson Art on Sam Peterson Art on Twitch is asking, I had a question about how painting for mass production works for fungosaurs. Like, is it machine done, or are there companies that offer that service on a large scale? All right, this looks good. Let's click preview. So, Sam, to answer your question, mass production is its own different ball game. 3D printing is really useful as a prototyping tool. So this is a fungosaur prototype that I did for a little stegosaurus. And that's really, the start of where 3D printing is really valuable. I can use this as a prototyping tool. I can have this painted. I can send it to the factory, and then they can use my 3D print to create their tooling. And that will be then used to make a metal tool, which will then be injection molded or rotocast with melted plastic going into that tool and spinning around really quickly, or just letting it sit to create all of the flexible vinyl plastic toys. Once you have the base toys, all of them have to be hand painted. All of my fungosaurs will be hand painted for sure. And that's why I'm going to be going to visit the factory at the end of this month to make sure that to do a bit of quality control, to make sure that it's painted properly, painted well. And the company can also send you samples in order to have them checked by hand, and you can check them here. You don't have to visit them. But this is all basically the mass production pipeline that has kind of been the same since the 80s for, in some regards. You have to send them a few different models, scaled up slightly because there's certain shrinkage sometimes. You have to send painted proofs, and they send stuff back to you. Oftentimes, depending on where your factory is, you have to, go through multiple rounds before you can be completely satisfied and you go to your final thing. All right, here we go. This is looking much better. So there isn't, so to speak, a company that offers this service. I had to go through a bit of a process of contacting many toy makers, many factories, and single out the one that would give me the best quote for my job, because I was having 16,000 toys made. So I wanted to get the best price possible. So you can go through sourcing agencies where they'll kind of take a cut, but they'll handle a lot of the communication for you, or you can go through finding your own factory and trying to chat with them yourself, get their quotes. Depending on where you're looking for a factory, China, Mexico, America, India, this process can vary tremendously. So I can't really recommend any factory per se or any sourcing agency per se. I can recommend the one I'm using to do fungosaurs, but only after I feel comfortable with the production. I've been working with these guys for a year, but I don't feel comfortable recommending them thoroughly until I see that my production has gone well. Once I have the final products in hand and I'm happy with how everything's gone through, then I'll be more comfortable recommending a specific factory. Personally, because I don't want to recommend you to a factory that gives you a ton of trouble, All right, so here's the slicing. Here's the scaffolding and the build plate. And here's all the scales, all the scaffolding, everything going well and printing together. So now I can see that I'm happy with this. This looks good to me. So I'll click export and export this out, chest scales test 3, save it. And I can also send it to the printer. This is an 8-hour print. With the printer, I'm going to be sending it using a USB stick. So I'll plug in my USB, click export, and export to my USB directly. Navigate over to that, my PC, USB drive, chest scales test 3, save that G code. All right, done. Cool. All right, that's all good. So now I've got this piece from ideas to reality. The only step missing is reality. I need to transfer it now from ZBrush through Idea Maker onto the USB to the printer, and then we'll start the print. So I'll turn my printer on. Button back there. Plug in the USB. I'll have to put the build plate back in. I'm going to take these little bits off. May wipe down the print bed. This is a little dust cloth. Make sure nothing's stuck on this thing. Might be better for you guys if I scale this up again so you can see what I'm doing. There's the build plate, ready to go back into the printer. And there's the printer. A bit hard to see down there. Need to figure out a better way to actually move my camera to position. I'll remove the top because I don't need the top. Oftentimes with printing, you want either it to be controlled temperature, so that's why you would need the top. Most times with PLA printing, printing in PLA material, you don't need the top. So move that aside, slide this back into place. And I'll just use a couple of clips to clip that build plate into the printer. Just one clip, two clip, and three clip. All right, close that up. Now we're ready to start printing, and hard for you guys to see because it's like way over there, but we'll try to pull this out a bit. There's a interactive screen on my printer right there, and I can tell it what to print. So I can just press the button and then it'll print it. So forgive me for the webcamness of this video. But I'm going to go to print. I'm going to go to my USB, select chest scales, and start print. So it's loading the print file. The filament's already all set up. The build tray is in. It's saying this is going to be an 8-hour, 54-minute print. So it's going to wait for the bed to heat up slightly and for the nozzle to heat up slightly. And then it's going to start the process. All right. Looks like I'm getting asked more questions on the Twitch stream about mass production and factory stuff. I'd be happy to cover that more in depth for you guys to get a sense of how much things cost for manufacturing. You can visit this site, Happy Worker. They actually have an awesome website where they're a sourcing company that helps you design and prototype toys. I had a student that worked here, told me all about it. But basically, they're a toy manufacturer that can help you create vinyl and resin. You don't have to use them. I don't want to recommend any company in particular because I didn't use them. But what you can do is check out their options for something like vinyl figures, action figures, plush toys. And they have a great FAQ section. They've got a great sense of quantity and pricing, so you can see how much things would cost. In mass production, there's a thing called MOQ, that's minimum order quantity. You need to order, generally speaking, 2,000 to 5,000 of any toy that you want. Otherwise, it's not really worth the time for the factory. So if even if you lower that price point down to $1,000, $1, let's say $1 or $2 per toy, that's still a minimum of $5,000 US just to make 2,500 toys for just the order. On top of that, you have the tooling cost, which is the cost of creating the metal tool, which the prints get poured into. I can give you an example of that, what that looks like, at least the process of making the tooling. So here's the 3D prints that I sent, and you can see some of them are sliced and keyed for my fungosaurs, and they're making the tool. It's an actual very physical process using wood and wax and making the tool, which then gets poured into metal. And then you're going to have this tool, and that tool generally costs anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 or more. usually 3 or 4,000 depending on how big your part is. So at base minimum, if you're looking into getting into mass production for one vinyl toy that's not that big, you're looking at anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 US to make that happen. So that's your barrier of entry. That's why it's hard for most artists to fund their own projects. I personally had to get some help, so I went the Kickstarter route and launched Fungusaurs as a mystery box toy and augmented reality game so that I could, have something to pitch to people. And I was able to raise almost 21,000 successfully with 238 backers, mostly friends and family. So it's hard to make your project go viral right away, starting something brand new. But the cool thing is I'm working on a augmented reality game for these creatures. I'm making the 3D printed toys as well as the mass production toys. And I'm kind of going around pitching an animated series soon. So thinking of it holistically, thinking about the storytelling I want to do, thinking about the what I want to build. I actually did a little animated story as well, where I animated just in 2D and After Effects 2.5D, a little backstory for my Fungusaurs to get people more emotionally involved. You have to do a bit of work in order to convince people that your product is worth funding. So if you wanted to go the crowdfunding route in order to start getting some funding for your product, then I recommend that. You know what I mean? But if you But I don't, want to recommend a specific factory or specific company because, the quotes really vary. Like it's a wide range if you're getting something made here in America versus Mexico versus India versus China, and also depending on who you're talking to. Someone might try to rip you off. Oftentimes, not often, but it has happened where you send toys to a factory and they say they're going to make 1,000 or so and send them to you, but they end up making 100,000 and putting them on the black market in their own countries. So you have to be careful and decide who you're going to be working with. So I don't want to recommend any specific factory, but you can see Happy Worker to get a better sense reading their FAQs, reading their process to get a sense of timeline, quantity, pricing, and service. All right, hope that answers your question, Sam Peterson. All right, cool. All right, so there's my Idea Maker print all gone. Now it's starting on my print bed here in the Raise 3D N2 Plus. It's going to be a bit hard for you guys to see, again, on the webcam, but I can try. No harm in trying to show you a little bit of a top-down view. Nope, you can't see it at all. Basically, it's starting the print. Okay, scale this back down. I got to come up with a solution that'll let you guys see what's on the print bed here rather than just on the webcam. Okay, in any case, that's that. Back in ZBrush then, I can start thinking about the next piece I want to do, which is going to be the shoulder piece. So, back in Maya actually, I don't know if I exported this out. I did. I smoothed it and exported out, so I can import that piece now into ZBrush. So let's go to my shoulder blade 2 OBJ. There's my shoulder plate. This is the thing we made in Maya really quickly, just using on top of the image plane. See if the scale is accurate. It should just pop right into place here. There it goes. Pretty nice. All right, so now that I've got that, I can start designing what my shoulder plate piece will look like. So let's make this a bit more vertical. Let's go to my geometry, divide it several times, delete lower. So this is about 53,000 polys. That's not really enough. Okay, cool. All right, so that's plenty of polys now. I don't know why ZBrush still says, there we go. It's 850,000 polys. Maybe divide it one more time. No, that's too much. I don't need 3.4 million polys just for this. Because all I'm using this plate for is to generate. ZBrush is giving me a ton of flack right now. I imagine because it's been open for a little bit. So let me save this scene as scale mail shirt 4, close ZBrush and open it up again so I can avoid a crash. Let's also close some of my other software here. Don't need Mesh Mixer open anymore. I can save the Idea Maker file. Let's go inside Aquaman project. Let's call this chest plate 3. Save that. Close out of Idea Maker. Maya. I can save it and close it too later. Open up ZBrush again, and let's start coming up with the concept for what our shoulder scales will look like. Okay. All right, so that was over here, scale mail shirt 4. Open that up. See if you guys have any more questions on Facebook and Twitch. Cheryl Laycock is saying, what is the program you're printing with? Cheryl, that is called Idea Maker. That is Raise 3D's print prep software. Core Grazer saying those 8 hours waiting for it to print must be painful. Kinda. I'll be going to work after this, so I'll be working on an actual project all day. So before I know it, by the time I come back home from work, the print will be done. And then I'll set off another print to print overnight. So it's okay, you know? It's like printing overnight, you just figure out the best practice, your best workflow time, and timing is not that bad. All right, so here's my shoulder piece. You can see it's a really quick, janky plate idea because I don't really care about the plate. All I'm using the plate for is to create my scales. So I'll go to my load brush, bring in my insert mesh scale brush, and I'm not going to be using any of these massive scales. I'll just be using these smaller scales. So I want these scales to flow in the direction of my deltoid. So that means from top down. So I'm not going this way, I'm going down this way, all the way down. And looking at my concept from earlier, that's why you did the concept, so we can see what these pieces would look like. I can turn on all these pieces and take a look at what my shoulder piece actually was intended to be. All right. So my shoulder piece here, the original thought that I had was that it was going to have a bit of a flow. It was going to go around the front and around the back. And if we take a look at it just on its own, we can get a sense of what I was going for originally. All of the spikes pointing outward, not really having anything up at the top, just having a sense of where it would go, but the top will get covered by the gorget. Let's actually test that out. Let's see how far it would get covered by the gorget. So about till there. So I have to basically leave a space open here for this to come up and down. And I don't want to have too many spikes because then it'll actually prevent my range of motion. So that'll be too much. All right, so this is basically what I'm going for. I can scale that down, drop it onto the canvas, and then draw out my shoulder plate. Uh-oh, that didn't work. All right, want to drop it on the canvas. Maybe I'll draw another thing, then go into edit mode, and then switch to my shoulder plate. There we go. All right, So basically this is what I'm trying to do, but now that I actually look at the shape of the plate, I like that there's a bit of a point, and that's determined by the shirt that I got to stitch stuff onto. You can see this shirt has a really nice point to it. That's part of the shirt already. So I think that'll look cool if I just implement that. And now I can update my concept and make a better design. So with my insert mesh scales selected, I can just start drawing them out and think about it on the fly. I'll turn solo off so I can see what's happening. And I might even select this color now so I can see the scales in color. There we go. All right, so now I can see the scales in color as they come on. I want them to be somewhat tightly packed together, but not really tightly packed together. I'm just trying to figure out the best flow. I'm trying to decide whether I want these scales to be pointing inward or outward, and I will decide that after I've drawn a few down. What I mean by that is, do I want them pointing outward or just inward? You can see I'm already kind of varying up the scales of these a little bit, and I'll adjust those on the fly as I go. I can always select some of these, either using the gizmo tool or the rotate transpose. Really a lot of options available to scale these. Move them around. And got to look at it from multiple angles. Always a good idea. Okay. Might rotate this one out a bit. Move it off to the side. Alright, keep messing with these in a second. Let's keep drawing some more. Let's think about it. I like the scale variation I had going on for the scales in the previous piece, which was the chest piece. So might as well try to recreate that on the shoulder, see if that works. May not, but let's try it. Basically adding a few really large scales for emphasis and variety. You can see in this process it's really about laying the scales down in a way that makes sense. Adjusting the scale on the fly, adjusting the move on the fly. Just got to remember to clip the bottom edges later so that they're all relatively the same height. Want to make sure I leave plenty of space in between these scales so that it doesn't mesh with each other. I know I'll end up dynameshing sooner rather than later. We've got a lot of space here for this one, so I might actually scale that quite a bit and make the other pieces fit around it. I like what's happening there. So this is relatively clean, relatively easy, relatively simple. And if that's the design we're going for, then this language makes sense. The form of it. It's in line with what we did earlier for the chess piece, at least with the multiple scales. Pretty different from the original concept idea, you can see, because these will be printed flat and then rotated around. That's one issue, though, with printing these big scales, is that they might not give me a lot of flexibility. They might not bend really well. But this will be right there. I don't really bend that much from there, so I think it'll be okay. But I might change up the design a bit on the fly. So this is one option. I can select all of these scales, and I can do a split unmasked points. So the scales are on their own layer, separate from the shoulder plate. That'll be what's printing. Or I can adjust it, you know. Here's the chest plate. And you can see with the chest plate, the scales didn't get that big. So this shoulder piece already, that one is already much bigger than the last chest piece. Let's lay that out there. Let's switch to the abs as well. Have those here. And then switch back to the shoulder plate. Want to make sure you're looking at all of your stuff at the same time so to see that you're using the same visual language. In this case, I'm using the same insert mesh brush, so it's pretty hard not to use the same visual language, but I don't know, some of these just feel way too big for me, and it isn't as epic as, say, this chest piece where all the parts are flowing outward. That might look cool to have some of these parts rotating a bit more outward. So I'll try again. I'll probably do this a few more times, trying to figure out the best design before I give in and say, all right, looks good. Nah, that looks weird. That looks strange as well. I don't like what's happening there. So maybe it needs a bit more flare around the edge here, down here, and not up there necessarily. And maybe once I start coming around the top, I'll just kind of start flowing these a bit smoother. Yeah, I like that idea. Not the execution of it, but I like the idea. Because instead of just being way too clean and smooth, I like that I can get a bit of variation and spikes going outwards. It makes it a bit more threatening. I don't want it to be too goody two-shoes of an armor. So I'm going to keep working on this. It is 10 o'clock, so I'm going to start wrapping up this stream. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's see if there's any last-second question. All right. I already answered that one. All right, so Sam Peterson Art's last question is prepping models for 3D printing a very involved process, or is it pretty straightforward in ZBrush? ZBrush is not a print prep software. It can help you with some prepping. It can dynamesh, which will make it a solid, watertight mesh. It can fill in any holes. It can clip, curve, orient. You can do a lot in ZBrush, but at the end, you're going to need to send it to a print prep software such as Mesh Mixer, Cura, Idea Maker, Preform, in order to send it to the specific printer you're using. As far as is it really involved, that really depends on what you're printing. If you're really interested in this, I'd recommend checking out my class at Mold 3D Academy. That's self-paced classes, 3D printing for ZBrush artists. And I talk in depth about making wearables like the dress up there, making character prints, making jewelry prints, small-scale miniature prints. That's actually the company I'm working at right now, the company that makes HeroForge.com, and making custom miniatures, where you can basically decide on your character's outfit, their proportions, their race, what kind of weapons they'll be holding, what kind of base they've got. Let's see here. Let's switch to some handheld weapons. Switch this one up and change the pose, or even put it on a mount, and then send this to print. So this is the company I'm currently working for. Loving working there at the moment. And I talk about all of this process. It's a pretty affordable class for 8 weeks of lectures, all sorts of stuff. And you can see a webinar on some of my slicing and keying, and you can see a bunch of my student gallery work. So Sam, if you are interested in learning all the nuts and bolts of preparing stuff for 3D printing, as well as post-processing and different types of products, I'd recommend checking out that class. I will be streaming on here for ZBrush for a little bit. So if you want to see more of my stuff, that's under pixelogic.com, ZBrush Live, author Aiman Akhtar. And you can see my schedule. I'll be streaming for the next 2 weeks on Monday as well. And you can see the previous streams. So thanks everyone for joining me today for the stream. I'm going to start logging out now. And if you want, just stay in touch. Hit me up anytime. You can check out my stuff and email me from aiman3d.com. And that's about it, guys. I'll give you an update on how much of this I get done by this weekend if the shoot happens, and maybe continue next week if it doesn't. So, thanks. Thanks for tuning in. And arrivederci.